Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. One of the hardest things about being a prepper is getting started. If you're new, it's easy to get overwhelmed by all the information out there about what you supposedly need to do and what you need to have. I know that when I first got started, I made a lot of mistakes. There was a long period of time where I thought I was a prepper, but I really wasn't. I had a lot of holes in my preps that left me and my family exposed, and there was a lot of important knowledge that I just didn't have. So today we're going to talk about what I did wrong and what I do differently if I had to start over, which will hopefully help at least some of y'all avoid my mistakes, saving you time, frustration, and maybe even some money too. One of the biggest changes I would make if I had to start over would be to focus more on the essentials that would actually keep me and my loved ones alive during a disaster. For years, I was what you could call a geardo. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a person who buys gear just because they think it's cool. The word itself is a mixture of gear and weirdo. Some people will probably say that I'm still a little bit of a weirdo, but that's besides the point. But early on, I focused most of my efforts on defensive preps, mainly because that's what I was interested in. So really, my prepping was just me buying more stuff for my favorite hobbies. Then, like many other people, I experienced some major events that show me how vulnerable I really was. In 2020, mass shortages and panic buying made pretty much everything harder to find, and also had the additional fun effect of totally sinking the business I had at the time that was already stinking it up to begin with. Then in 2021, when things got a little more normal-ish, a massive ice storm wreaked havoc in Texas, which is where I live. And as I experienced these situations, I slowly started to realize that Federal and CCI didn't make anything I could actually eat, so I started to change the way I prepared. While I didn't completely abandon the more fun aspects of preparedness, I did put a greater emphasis on the things that we use daily. I started focusing more of my resources on food storage, specifically on more cost-effective methods like storing dry goods in Mylar bags and stockpiling canned goods. Then, while I did have a Berkey and some other water filters, I also went ahead and expanded my water storage capabilities. Where I live, we can go a while between rainstorms, and the nearest water source is far enough away that I really don't care to walk back and forth to it all that often. And you always want to have the ability to both purify and store water as needed anyway. Another thing I do differently if I had to start over would be to get a backup power source sooner, and then also, more important than that, understand the strengths and weaknesses of the different options that are out there. For a while, my family and I used budget options to get us through short-term power outages. I talked about a lot of these in a video I did a few weeks ago, and they worked okay for giving us the light that we needed and some air circulation. However, they did have some pretty significant limitations, the main one being that they couldn't help preserve the food that we had in our fridge or box freezer. Another issue was that once we ran out of battery power, we didn't have any way to recharge them. And of course, when it comes to regular alkaline batteries, recharging them isn't an option anyway, so we had to store a bunch of those. So shortly after the ice storm, I went ahead and I picked up a mid-size gas generator using some extra money that we happened to have coming in. It was big enough to run what I needed it to, and it was fairly fuel efficient, but it always bothered me that once I ran out of fuel, I knew that we'd be dead in the water again. And given our current living situation, storing large quantities of fuel isn't the safest thing to do. Then, when you take into account how much propane tanks and gas cans cost on top of the fuel itself, having enough of that on hand for even 2 weeks would have been prohibitively expensive. However, a few months after I got that gas generator, I had the opportunity to take a look at the original EcoFlow Delta solar generator. And what I really liked about it was that it gave me a way to keep essential devices running long term. It could gather and store energy from sunlight, which is awesome because we have plenty of that in Texas. But since then, I've been able to test several other solar power options and learn about which ones work best for different situations. They're now our primary backup power source, and I like to thank EcoFlow for sponsoring us today. If you're on a budget, then a small power station like the River 2 with a set of 110-watt solar panels will do an excellent job keeping essential devices running. While it won't be able to power a fridge or other large appliances, it will allow you to keep things like flashlights, radios, and your cell phone running pretty much indefinitely. The River 2 Pro has a larger capacity and a more powerful inverter, so it'll allow you to power small devices longer between charges, and it can even power some larger things like a box freezer. The River series is also a great choice if you want to take something camping with you. We took our River 2 Pro with us on our 10-day road trip a couple of months ago, and it was our primary power source while we were camping at the Grand Canyon. We used it to inflate our air mattresses and charge our cell phones, and it had enough power left over that we never even had to hook it up to solar panels. Then the Delta 2 and Delta 2 Max are excellent choices for running more power-hungry devices like appliances and then also power tools. The Delta 2 Max with one extra battery can keep my fridge and box freezer running for up to 18 hours, but those of you with more efficient appliances than what I have are going to get much longer run times than that. They're probably your best bet if you want a power source you can take with you if you need to bug out, since they have plenty of power, but they can still easily fit in your car. And if you're wanting a whole home power solution, then EcoFlow has some viable options for that. I've been using the Delta Pro Ultra for the past several months as a battery backup system for my home, and it works extremely well. When combined with the Smart Home Panel 2, it can power the most important circuits in your home and then switch over automatically to battery power when there's an outage. It'll then recharge itself from the same plug on the Smart Home Panel 2 when the power comes back on. It can handle up to 5,600 watts of solar input, and you can expand your system up to 90 kilowatt hours. The new Delta Pro 3 is another good whole home power option. Like the Delta Pro Ultra, it's compatible with the Smart Home Panel 2, so it can provide immediate backup power for your home. It's also a very good middle ground option between the large Delta Pro Ultra and the more portable Delta 2 Max, meaning it can provide a ton of power, but it's still a manageable size if, say, you need to load it in the back of a truck or an SUV. My family and I just rode out Beryl, and I felt really good knowing that we had the Delta Pro 3 on standby. Another nice thing about all these power options is that you can recharge them multiple ways. In addition to using solar panels, you can also charge them from a standard 110, 120 volt outlet like what you have in your home or on a traditional generator. And EcoFlow's charging speeds are some of the fastest on the market, so if you need to use a generator to top them off during times, say, where you're not getting a whole lot of sunlight, there's a lot of overcast stuff, then you're not going to have to use a lot of fuel to do that. Then almost all of them, with the exception of the largest models, can be recharged using the 12-volt port in your car. Now, if you don't have a backup power option yet, then now is one of the best times of the year to pick one up. EcoFlow is offering big discounts on several other products. Depending on what you order, you could save up to nearly $2,900, and they're also doing deals of the day on Prime Day. You can learn more about those using the links in the description below, and if you use this code, then you can get an extra 5% off qualifying orders. The next thing I'd change if I had to start over is put a greater focus on medications and first aid items. No matter how healthy you and your family members are and how clean you try to be, people are still gonna get sick. And when that happens, you don't want to be panicking trying to find medicine to help them out. For example, my son was around 9 months old when everything started to go down in 2020, and like most babies do, he got sick a few times. And unfortunately, with everything that was going on, meds were very hard to find, which put a lot of stress on me as a parent. That's not something that I ever want to deal with again, so now I try to keep plenty of over-the-counter medications at home. Then, if you can afford one, an emergency antibiotic kit is good to have around as well. Another thing I do differently on the medication front is do a better job keeping medications with me when I'm away from home. In last week's video, I mentioned a time that I got sick while I was at a conference, and what made that situation even worse was the fact that I didn't pack any meds beyond just stuff for allergies. Thankfully, my wife was there to help me and also to drive, but nothing was open in that part of town where she could buy Pepto or some other kind of medication. We had to check out of the hotel and drive all the way to the Buc-ee's in New Braunfels before we could stop and pick something up. Now, after that, I try to keep a stock of basic medications in my EDC bag and I pack a decent medical kit whenever we travel. Then, when it comes to first aid items, I've also started to stock larger bandages beyond just simple band aids. Because if somebody has a large cut, you're going to need larger pieces of gauze to help absorb blood and stop bleeding, and then ways to cover the wound to keep it clean. I picked up a couple of these wound care kits that you can get from Walmart, and they contain a lot of what you would need for this, and then also keep a tourniquet in my EDC bag in case something really bad happens. And another side to having your medical needs taken care of is making your home as clean and hygienic as possible. Start by having basic cleaning supplies and plenty of heavy-duty trash bags on hand. Also, be sure to have a waste management plan to prevent things from festering in around your home, along with pesticides to control insects and rodents. I've included an entire page of medical supplies in my ultimate stockpile checklist that's free for anybody who signs up for my monthly newsletter, and you can do that using this card or the link in the description below. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the channel and select all notifications if you haven't already done so. The next thing that I'd do differently if I had to start over as a prepper is be more disciplined with my finances. While preppers put a great deal of thought into dealing with things like natural disasters and civil unrest, the fact of the matter is that all of us will experience a financial disaster sometime in our adult lives. It's actually more likely that we'll experience several, some with multiple situations within a very short amount of time. It could be a medical situation that crops up, and considering how horrible insurance is nowadays, chances are you'll be paying a lot out of pocket. Then you could also lose your job, or your home could get damaged in a storm, or you may just have a horrific plumbing issue that costs hundreds of dollars to repair. And by the way, it only takes around 4 or 5 flushable wipes to completely clog your main sewer line, so if you're storing those, do not flush them or let your 5-year-old flush them. But anyway, even if you're investing a lot in preparedness supplies, don't forget to set some money back for those other disasters that we all face. You see a lot of advice out there regarding how much you should have. For example, Dave Ramsey recommends having a $1,000 emergency fund, while others recommend having at least 3 months worth of expenses set aside. I personally think that 1,000 is a little low, 3 months is probably more reasonable, but one thing most people don't ever mention is insurance deductibles. Look at the deductibles on your health insurance and your homeowner's insurance and see how much those are. If you have at least that much set aside, it should prepare you if something catastrophic happens either to your health or your home, and it should also be enough to handle things like the aforementioned plumbing debacles as well. Then of course, stay away from credit cards because it's really easy to dig yourself into a big giant hole with those. Another thing that I'd change if I had to start over as a prepper is do a better job thinking for myself. Like many of you, I would watch YouTube videos or read articles on websites showing all the different things that I quote unquote needed. Looking back on it, sometimes all that did was overwhelm me to the point where I didn't do much at all, or it caused me to waste money on something that I didn't really need. I wish that I did a better job looking at my own situation, the threats I'm most likely to face, and then take logical steps to address those. And y'all, I know that we talk a lot about gear on this channel, but if I mention something that would be completely useless, don't get it just because I show it on a video or because I like it. Just because it works for me or somebody else, that doesn't mean that it'll work well for you too. So when I show a list of things preppers need, think of it as a list of options. If you need it and getting it won't put you in horrible debt or make existing horrible debt worse, then yeah, get it. But if it makes no sense and would bury you financially, then don't do it. Then the last thing that I would do differently is that I would start prepping sooner. I'm sure most of y'all know that getting started with anything is always the hardest part of the process. So if you haven't started prepping yet, then do something small to get yourself going. Do something like pick up an extra 5 or 10 pound bag of rice or an extra package of water bottles. Or if you have a little extra money, spend $20 on some canned goods or on a good portable water container. The key is to just do something and then commit to doing another small thing the next time that you get paid. As you continue to do this, you'll get more comfortable with it, and if you're consistent, it shouldn't take too long to have a decent stockpile of supplies set aside. And then if you're not sure what to do, then invest in your prepper education. I have an entire library of videos that show the basics of how to store food long term, how to purify water, and more on this channel, all of which is totally free. Then there's a lot of excellent books out there that cover basic preparedness, like The Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide. It's one of my favorite prepping books since it's so thorough and it's also very easy to read. Now, earlier I mentioned that one of the main things that I'd change if I had to start over as a prepper would be to focus more on preparedness essentials. So if you want to see 15 of the most important items that every prepper should have, then go ahead and click here. Or if you want to see some really important preps that a lot of folks leave out, then click here. Once again, I'd like to thank EcoFlow for sponsoring us today. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.